didn't change the sound. I changed the way I thought about the instrument. And this, in my opinion, is one of the most important things nobody teaches you when you start playing keyboards. Because you probably learn chords, you learn scales, you learn the parts of your favorite keyboard players. But almost nobody teaches you how to play a sound that, unlike a piano, has no natural decay. As long as you hold the key, the sound stays at the same volume. And this is where many keyboard players get stuck. They look for the solution in the wrong place. They think they need the right keyboard, the perfect Hammond clone, the best plugin, the exact preset from the record. So they change instrument, they change the software, they change settings. Maybe for the first 5 minutes everything feels right. They then go back to the original recording and something is still missing. There is always something that doesn't feel quite right, but often the problem is not the sound. The problem is the way you are playing it. Most keyboard players start with the piano, and that's fantastic foundation. It is probably the instrument that teaches musicians the most, but it also teaches a very specific way to thinking about sound. On the piano, the sound begins when you press the key, then it slowly fades away. Every chord is an event. You play it, you release it, and then the next chord begins a new event. And that's perfect, because this is exactly how the piano works. But what happens when you bring the same approach to an Hammond organ, to a polysynth, to a mellotron, to a string machine, to a pad sound? The behavior of the instrument changes completely. Let me show you. I hold a chord. Now I move to the next one. Did you hear a sound stop? No, because it never stopped. The sound was already there, still alive. So, why do so many keyboard players act as if it had already disappeared? This is one of the biggest mistakes when you play sustained instruments. They treat them like pianos with a different sound, but they're not. A Hammond organ, a polysynth, or a pad sound doesn't want to restart the sound every time you change chords. It wants you to preserve it. Watch what happens. In the first version, I release every note before playing the next chord. In the second, I keep holding every note that belongs to both chords and move only the notes that actually change. Same instrument, same preset, same notes. Only one thing is different: the way the notes are connected. The sound is never restarted. It simply evolves from one chord to the next. Let me show you how this works with another really simple and famous example. Just 2 chords from Pink Floyd's A Source for All Secrets from Live at Pompeii. Let's make a sound. Okay. If you approach these chords like a piano player, The harmony is correct. The note is correct. The sound is correct. But something is missing. Every chord feels like a new event. Now listen to the same two chords, but treating the organ as a sustained instrument. Same chords, same organ sound, but now the sound never really stops, it simply changes shape. And this is exactly what you hear in a great keyboard players. When you listen to Tony Banks Hammond playing the Mellotron of King Crimson Records or great synth parts from the 70s and 80s, you don't just hear a sequence of chords, you hear something that continues to live. You hear one sound changing shape over time, and that is completely different from play a chord, letting go, and play the next one. This is also why changing plugins often doesn't solve the problem. You can have the most realistic Mellotron, you can have the most expensive Hammond clone, you can have the synth plugin with the exact preset from the record, but if you keep playing it like a piano, it will still sound like a piano with a different tone. Because the sound is only one part of the equation. The other part is the way you make it live. And this is exactly the kind of work I do with keyboard players who want to go beyond simply finding the right preset. Because knowing an instrument is not just knowing which keys to press. It means understanding how that instrument wants to be played. The big shift happens when you stop thinking in terms of separate chords. You are not just moving from one chord to another. You are transforming one continuous sound. And this changes the question you ask yourself. Instead of thinking, what is the next chord? You start asking, what doesn't need to change? Which note can stay? Which voices can move the smallest distance possible? Which parts of the sound can continue instead of starting again? This idea has a name: voice leading. It is one of the most powerful tools for creating natural connection between chords. But even before learning the theory, it starts with a different way of listening. So, the next time you play a Hammond, a polysynth, a Mellotron, a string machine, or a pad sound, don't just think about the chord that comes next. Stop for a second and ask yourself, what doesn't need to change? Because maybe the secret behind those great vintage keyboard sounds is not only the way they were created, it's the way they were played. And if you want to develop this kind of approach to your own playing, you can find the link below to talk with me and understand to move beyond simply finding the right sound. That's all for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.